Well, hail to you, champions. JayReimsGaming here. I hope you all are having an incredible day. I do live stream normally Friday through Sunday nights between 4 and 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So don't forget to like, follow, share, all that fun stuff, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a live stream. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Last Epoch. Now, I got to play Last Epoch about 30 hours. Experienced, I think, up to about level 60-ish. I got to see all of the story, the gameplay, did a little bit of the end game content with the monoliths, the dungeons, the arena is what they call it, which is kind of like their endless dungeon alternative to Diablo 3 with their echoing screams or echoing whatever, what it was called. And I kind of wanted to chime in because I've been seeing a lot of people share a lot of information about this game and what caused it to kind of disappear, like what happened to Last Epoch. And looking at the numbers, it looked like it peaked pretty high, I think, during, like, shortly after its release. Like almost every live streamer out there was streaming it, especially all of the big ones, all the well-known ones. I even live streamed it. I even waited several weeks because I knew the issues that they had on release, and I was like, nope, I'm gonna go ahead and go back to D2 until they fix that, and that way I can play a little bit with my brother and really enjoy the game, and kind of find out what my actual thoughts were. And I did do a game review on this game. I did give it a 7 out of 10. But I think there are some glaring issues with this game as far as like why it did not retain the players that it was hoping to. I think the first reason was that the story just wasn't there. You didn't really understand who you were into the story. You didn't really understand, who the bad actors were. Precisely what you are fighting for, except for just going through these different opportunities in time to try to just basically stop things from happening in the future, which even the time traveling aspect wasn't really, I think, well worked out. I also really feel like, although the game is beautiful and it's interesting, I feel like the graphics could be better, especially when you're looking at AAA titles such as Diablo 4, Path of Exile 2 that's coming out here pretty soon. A lot of the games have really updated their graphics, and they definitely have an interesting flavor to them nowadays. And unfortunately, Last Epoch just didn't quite hit that, especially with the transmogs. The transmogs was okay, but they weren't great. And when you got to the point where you started opening up things like the echoes, things like monoliths and stuff like that, it felt more of the same. It didn't feel like you had a very vast difference going from the leveling process into the end game content. It just felt like more leveling, more quests that just felt more the same, unfortunately. And I think that really did not hold people's interest, even though the gameplay is fun, even though the leveling experience is actually really good. The overall feeling gameplay is really good, despite the issues with some of the abilities bugging out, despite some of the issues with like the dungeons and stuff bugging out. When you actually got to play the game, it was fun. But overall, I really think that where they lacked was just that the end game just wasn't there, to be honest. It felt like you could run through all these different things and you don't have to get more gear to go to the bigger and better places. It's just these open up to you and you can just kind of run through them even if you don't have amazing gear. And so this game kind of turns into kind of reminiscent of Diablo 2, where you're just running the game over and over and over again until you get the best gear, and you're like, okay, I've made my character, now I can make another one. And I think even then, people just didn't really get excited about making other characters, just because playing through it, as far as the campaign aspect and the questing, was just not great. The quests were okay and they were fine, but the actual storytelling was not great. It wasn't good. And then when you proceeded into the end, the quote unquote end game, it just felt more like leveling. And yeah, you get some like really interesting gear, and you can like get better and do more damage and stuff like that. But there wasn't like okay, now that you are 100, now this opens up a whole new area. And after you do your monoliths, your dungeons, your arenas and stuff, that gear will precede you into the next space, which gets you even better gear. And so you have to prepare for it. But that just isn't there. When it comes to the fights, when it comes to the mini bosses and the boss fights, they're very forgettable. It's not very interesting. It's not very dynamic. I think the best example of what they could have done, and I think maybe they bit off more than they could chew, and I think they really wanted to go in the direction of the Lagan, the god of the sea fight. I think that is probably the direction that they wanted to go when he got into the more endgame content, where the boss fights are much more interesting. They're much more intricate. You have to play really, really well. You have to have decent gear, otherwise you're going to die. I think I died like maybe 8 or 10 times on that fight, and I didn't even have great gear, even though it was just kind of like a part of the quest line, the campaign. And once I got to the fight, I was like, oh my gosh, if the fights are like this when I get into the dungeons, if the fights are like this when I get into monoliths and stuff like that, this is going to be a really interesting and fun game. And unfortunately, it just fell flat. It just didn't happen. You had that one really great fight, and it was like, that's it. Like, you gave us a really good fight during the leveling part, but you didn't like extend those awesome, interesting, dynamic fights into the end game. And I think a lot of people were thrown off by that. I think people were taken back, like, what the heck is going on? How come we're not having these different things going on in this game? And so I think once people ran through everything enough and they got to level 100, I think people just kind of like, well, I guess that's it until next season. And so I kind of feel like when they were coming up on their release of 1.0, I think they focused, personally, this is just my opinion, of course, all these opinions are out there right now, I think they focused a little too much on just trying to make the leveling process the best as it could be, and reiterating on that until it was really good. And they did a really good job on the leveling process, and the quests going from one to the next were great. It's just that the storytelling was just not very compelling. It wasn't interesting, even though they did have some really interesting characters involved with it and what was going on in the story. It wasn't enough to make it where you actually cared about the characters. It didn't make it to where you cared about, what was your guy doing in this universe. It was just kind of like, I'm just playing another game. And that's where I think a lot of other games have a lot more interesting ways to do that. And I think Diablo 3 is probably one of the best storytellers when it comes to ARPGs and implementing different cutscenes and stuff that puts your actual character into it. And I think some of that kind of translated a little bit into Diablo 4. And so I am planning in the future to kind of give that game a really good college try, so to speak, because it came out and I was just like, this is awful. I do not want to play this. And so people are hailing the new season 4 coming out, the Diablo 1.0, because all games now are coming out in early access and just not complete, which is really, really sad. And so, but overall, I really do think that if they can really hone in some of the quest stuff and the storytelling, if they can hone in the boss fights and bring those fights like the Lagan, God of the Sea fights into the end game, I really think they can save this game. I really do believe that they could bring a lot of the players back. They had hundreds or 200s of thousands of people playing the game and streaming it. And it is fun. I really think that they could do that. Maybe upgrade the graphics a little bit, tune and like fix a lot of these issues with the character abilities and the dead ends and the mini fights and the boss fights and the mini boss fights. I really think they can do it. I just think they just need to buckle down and decide if they're just going to just get by so they can get that next price point and make more money, or if they're really going to sit down and make this game what it could potentially be. So thank you guys so much for watching another vlog. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, definitely like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss content release, and we'll see you in the next one.